All right. Thank you everyone for joining me. I really wanted to do this presentation because I was thinking about what skills would be useful for both an administrative, starting your career or any career. And basically, these topics came to me as I was trying to prepare for more of like the software like skills that we had talked about working on. But we're always should be growing and learning, right? And myself, I am trying to further develop my leadership skills and things like that. And so as I was doing research in leadership, I was, listening to these core skills, and I was like, everyone should be doing this. So I wanted to do this presentation because you guys are the future leaders. And so I'd like to treat you as such. And I'm going to share with you things that in my leadership research I've come across and I felt as though have applied to my career and have actually successfully had an impact, right? So these are tried and tested skills, and I'll kind of talk through each item and maybe give you little like stories or things I'm working on and things like that to just make it not just like a random list, right? These are all things I've applied to my life and I think have had an impact. And then we'll do a future presentation on deeper leadership skills. That's to come. And then we also have a plan for doing like a project management presentation. We have a member of Power of Work who just finished their PMP, which is a type of certification you can get. And so we're going to have him hopefully present on that. And then next week, we'll go over very specific administrative and basic technology tips with Google and Microsoft Office Suite. We already had a presentation on what to do when you have a hard boss or a coworker, but I'm happy to go over that again, and I can try to find the link for everybody. What I really want to go over today are aspects you should apply very early in your career and really set you up for growth and for like more challenging aspects. These should all seem really basic, but they're actually very critical. So think about it before you start your new job, and then periodically check in to see if you're actually doing them, right? It's always easier to hear things and then be like, yeah, I'm good. And that's why most of these should seem like that. But I'd love it if you, when we help you get your new career started, check in with yourself, kind of like day 2, end of week 1, month 1, like, are you actually doing this? And, do you think this can help you, right? You'll get to know your coworkers by then, and it'll have more of an impact. So let's see. Let's get started. So a lot of these characteristics and tips kind of blend into each other, but I really advise that you take these to heart since I've actually seen a lot of issues in the workforce. And as a manager of people, people struggle with these and then they wonder why their career is not progressing. So it's not just the technical skills you have, it's also these soft skills. And if you don't have these or you have the opposite of these, you will not progress in your career. Like as a manager, I would not promote you. Like even though you're doing great in everything else, you don't have these, you cannot really grow. And that's really important. And people get stuck on this and they're like, why can't I move from like kind of more of a basic entry level to the next level? And it's usually these. I feel like I've learned a lot in my career, and there are still many things I want to improve. So I think that's a mindset to have, is always be trying to learn. But I absolutely love my job and my career, and I feel like I've been really successful. And so I'd like to pass these along. So it's not like I'm not just a random person reading from a list of things that like might help you. Like these are tried and true things that I have applied to my life and I think have made me to the level of success I have. So let's apply these as though you just got a new job. So congratulations, you're hired. Now we're going to kind of go through these tips as though it's kind of your first few days or your first week at work, okay? So tip 1, really important. Show up for the job. There is no true like easy way out of life, right? There is no like secret sauce that you just apply your sprinkle on your manager and boom, like, everything's easy and you don't have to work for it. Like life is work. And if you do things right, it can be a lot easier, but you still have to put in the work. And so I think just accepting that fact, sometimes people are like, how do I get ahead? And you're like, do the work, just do it, like try to learn it. And you're like, that's too hard. So To do this, like, you just really have to ace the job. And I tell people when we get people jobs at Power of Work, I tell them to really hit the ground running. That's like my terminology for that. But you want to ace a job and put in the work. So, step one to this is before you start, find the job description that you applied to, right? You just got the job, and so go back to the job description. So it's always good to save the job descriptions too, because not just the link will go away. Reread the job description you've applied for. This gives you insight into what they're looking for. Are there aspects of the job that you did not feel strongly about? If so, like, study it. If they said, oh, have Trello experience, and just didn't mention it in your interview, and they liked everything else, but they have it there on the job description, that means that it's something they care about. So go Google Trello and you figure out, okay, this is what it is, this is how to use it, just so you're a little bit more familiar with it. And that way, when you start, you just hit the ground running. So you have a lot of resources. So main things are Google, then YouTube. YouTube has a huge array of things. And then there's other resources, just searching the internet, but also us at Power of Work. We care about you and we care about you starting your career. And so we will help you. If there's something that you want to learn more about, like, we're happy to do a whole bunch of research, try to put together a presentation, because it's almost always going to be useful to everybody, right? So there's no reason not to kind of like utilize our help. So the first few weeks are critical, and we'll talk a little bit more about first impressions. But I do try to recommend that everyone, when you can, and this doesn't sound that much fun, but just do a little extra work the first few weeks. Take your time to do things right while at work. So kind of almost like slow down a little bit at work, but then at home study aspects. So like during your first couple weeks, you're gonna be like, oh, I'm just studying this and I'm reading this. Kind of try to absorb as much as you can and learn, and kind of as much as you can in your first couple days, but at home study it. So take great notes and review these notes and any sort of guides and resources that are provided. I highly recommend showing up with a notepad, and I think it's good to bring one on your first day. And I actually sometimes bring it to an interview, just so I can take like little notes. And then basically it shows the person that's training you that not only do you value their time, like you're not just like, I'm just sitting here blankly absorbing things. You're taking notes, trying to pay attention, and that you care. Sometimes they'll tell you, oh, you don't need to take notes. I'll have a guide, like this will all be provided to you. And then you kind of, put down your pen and just kind of absorb. But if you can, right afterwards, maybe write down a few key highlight items. But I really recommend this. Also, one aspect is that on your first day, there are a lot of things you'll learn, including what kind of software they're using, right? Are they using Google, or are they using Office Suite, right, for their internet, or for their like mail and all the different aspects? Do you use SharePoint? You kind of, if you can, jot down what they're using so that when you go home, you can start to research this. Because basically, sometimes the first couple days are slow. Like you might not have access to your systems, or you're waiting to get trained on certain aspects. And while this is not your fault, you don't want to just sit around and wait, right? And I'll continue to talk about this, but you don't want to, at the end of the week, you want to be like, okay, how much did Hillary get trained on? Or where's Hillary in her progression of what she needs to learn to do the job? So you want to be as proactive as you can. And we'll talk a little bit about that in terms of what that means and what you can do to be proactive. So, proactivity. I think this is a super important. All of these skills are items that you can talk about in an interview, and then we'll get you like points, because this is something that people really look for, and it's a big flaw of a lot of people, especially at the entry level area. So think big picture and think ahead. When you're going into a meeting, be thinking about all the different aspects that could happen. So like try to predict things and think about things, right? So always be thinking. But what are the questions that might be asked? Show people that you're doing the first tip, which is showing up for the job. And then one great piece of advice that I got early in my career from my first boss, and she had told me, rather than rein me in, she would rather like having to like slow me down, versus to constantly push me. So she wanted me to run and just go with things. If I had an idea, go with it, versus sitting there and waiting for her instructions. And so in other words, you should always be thinking ahead. So for example, if I completed one task, should I sit around and wait to be told what to do, right? No. I should think about what has been suggested to me. You can review the work you've completed, right? So you always want to produce good work or have it be a quick draft. Like those are the two options. I think those are both good, but you always want to clarify if somebody's asking you to do something and they just want you to deliver it. Really proofread your stuff. Your stuff should be 100%. And you should always be proud of your work. So definitely proofread, review. I sometimes I make a lot of grammatical issues, and so I like to read things out loud. That is a really easy way for me to review things and catch things. And then doing, like I mentioned, a quick draft is useful because it can help you if somebody, like in a sense, one advice is not to go too slow either, because if somebody gives you a project, it's almost maybe you want to do an outline or get started so that if they check in with you later, you'd be like, hey, have you progressed on that? And you don't have anything to show, that's not really good either. So I would always recommend kind of getting started, do an outline, do a draft, and then continue to work on it based on whatever timeline you have. Now, like I mentioned, this scenario is where you've completed something. So let's say you've completed it and you turn it in. You want to be able to not sit around and wait for the next task, right? So you can review it. But then if you are wondering what to do next, you want to think about what they've maybe told you, right? Before you ask them. Or if you're like 100% certain no one's told you what to do yet, ask them, but don't say it in the term of, oh, I don't know what I should be working on. Instead, you want to be professional and say, I want to check in to see if you have any, like, what's the priority of upcoming tasks for me? Now, what's nice about this is that when you phrase it this way, you are showing very clearly that you're proactive because you're saying like multiple tasks and like priority. But when they tell you, don't just take, okay, this is what I should be working on. They're usually going to tell you the next two things also. So like that gives you the chance to be proactive for the next item. So you should then next time finish the one thing and send it off or whatever. You're like, here's my thing for you to review, and then move on to the next item immediately. Because you want to be proactive, you want to be working ahead, you don't want to be sitting around and waiting to be told something. That's a huge, because it's a huge waste for everyone. It's a huge waste of time. And in general, I think time is probably one of the most precious resources, especially like in the business world. All right, so let's go to the next tip, which is a little different. So integrity. While there is no in between, right? So like you either have or you don't. So I think sometimes people think there's like a scale, but realistically, if you like violate it, there's no way, like it's either you do or you don't. So of course you should be honest in all interactions with people. But this goes beyond just like, oh, I'm not stealing stuff or whatever, right? There's ways to have integrity in very small scenarios that not everyone thinks about. And this is really critical for trust, which we'll talk a little bit about further. So one example that not everyone thinks about is to make sure that you do not take credit for things that you didn't do. Now, this is while you're in the job. While in the interview, that's something different. You want to not be as humble, and you want to talk about all the accomplishments that like you took part in and you kind of like gained experience from. Once you start the job, you make sure that you do not take credit for other people's work. So, and sometimes it's tricky, like people just say it and you're like, what do I do? So that's why I kind of wanted to talk through this with you guys. So for example, if someone says, great job, Melanie, on that project, but it was a team effort, you could say, oh, Peter was instrumental in making this happen. Or if it's a complete accident, like you didn't even really be involved, you could say, oh, I'm flattered you mistaken my work for Sully's. So there's a good way to like very positively, but you want to be quick. You don't want to like be like, oh, and then not say anything, because there's never really an opportunity to say it later. And then when it comes out that you like, even if you're not taking credit, like somebody gives you the credit for something, you have to disperse it, and you have to disperse it quickly or it's not good. So always be honest. But the main thing is, if you fail at this once, like within the workforce, it will tend to haunt you and is so much harder to fix. Like it's like almost impossible, and it takes like a year of like good intentions and always being there to really change people's mindsets. And we'll talk a little bit about first impressions in general, but you do really want to always have that integrity. Okay, confidence. Well, you do not want to be obnoxious at work. And this is like, yeah, like again, I want to give you aspects that I'm working on. I have it where I try to rein myself in a little bit, in the sense that like you don't want to be obnoxious, but you want to be confident in business interactions. So if you're not confident on something, which could be the case when you're starting something new, then put in the hard work to become such. People will recognize your efforts and your confidence will grow. If you do not put in the extra work, your growth will be really slow. And this is really common with people who are like, okay, I want to do job X, but like the entry level job is the one below it. So, realistically, I'll go for that one first and then move up. But if you don't put in the effort for the entry level work, it's really hard for you to move up. And I think people get stuck in that spot where they're like, well, I don't really like this job. I want to be doing the next job. But it's like, yes, but the way to get to the next job the fastest is to do the job you're currently hired for really well. So, the fastest way to growth is to do what you can to accomplish and show that you're good at what you're doing. Also, being positive and confident kind of go hand in hand, and this gives people a better impression of you and creates a positive environment that you would like to be in. And this can be hard for people if it's not your go-to, and this can be hard if in general you tend to be a little bit more negative on things, or it's like part of your humor. I would definitely recommend toning it down at work, at least until you're like not in the entry level position, or you have like a year of like gotten to know people really well. And then you can kind of like, if you want to be sarcastic or whatnot, and it's in a very like one-on-one and you've gotten to know that person well, you can do it. But I would really recommend to watch that, because you don't know how people will take things. And I think just when in doubt, take the positive route. Because I've definitely seen with coworkers, people making jokes. I've actually seen this like multiple times where people make jokes and other people take it the wrong way. Like just a surprising handful of times, and then it slowly becomes an issue. Like somebody gets a bad impression, and then they think this of you, and then it kind of spirals out of control. So I would definitely recommend to not do that. Okay, this kind of goes to the next one, which is first impressions. So you mainly takeaway messages are be professional and watch your body language. It's commonly known that first impressions are critical and really hard to reverse. While some aspects of this might be like totally unfair and out of your control, there's just know that there's a biological component of someone doing a quick evaluation of you in the first couple interactions. And then if something happens, like if you know you messed up an interaction, you really need to be aware of it and try to quickly fix it. Like if you're like, know that, let's say the first time you talk to your director, your boss's boss or something, and you just stumble through it and you just kind of fumble and it's just not great, then the next time you have an opportunity, next time you're aware you have an opportunity to meet this person or you're in a meeting, you want to do everything you can to counter that possibly bad first interaction. Like, so just definitely, be there early, be professional, don't look at your phone, and all of those things. And I'll go over some of the tips that you want to do, but like you just want to counter it, and it's hard, and you're gonna have to do that a couple times, just to make sure that they didn't stick that impression of you of being like, oh, they have no idea what they're doing. So some overall tips are just to make sure that you don't slouch. Again, even if you naturally do, like these are things you're trying to counter in the workforce. Do not roll your eyes or kind of like side conversations with people, even though that might help you with that one rapport during a big meeting. Like the presenter and leadership, like will not like it, and they will have that impression of you. And again, like this will prevent you from moving up in your career. So I know a lot of people who are in management and leadership say that if they go to a meeting and they're going to a presentation, especially if they already know what the presentation is and it's really for the other people who are attending, what they mainly do is sit there and watch everybody. Watch their interactions, who's taking notes, who seems like they're all that paying attention, who's kind of just looking at their phone. So that's something that you need to be aware of, especially if it's like a larger meeting. And again, nowadays with Zoom, it's a little harder, but in that case, have your camera on. Don't turn your camera off a whole bunch because they know that when it's off, you're off doing something else. And get your water, get everything together. But so yeah, don't roll your eyes, don't slouch, don't look at your phone during work. Put a slight smile on your face if you're just kind of resting. Don't having a resting bee face. Just kind of appear welcoming. Dress appropriately. And I know this last one can be hard, so I kind of want to give you a tip that I've done. Typically, you want to dress more professional when unknown, and you don't know what it's going to be like. And then you can quickly scale back and judge what you see other people are wearing, right? But you always want to err on the side of being more professional. And then if it's a fairly casual workplace, which is, I've had this before, you might, on a day-to-day dress pretty casually. But then what I've done is I've kept like a blazer or just something that helps me appear a little bit more professional in my desk so that if I happen to go to a last minute meeting with leadership or my manager or, just somebody, I can throw it on. It doesn't look too awkward and it kind of dresses it up. It looks a little bit more like I'm here to work. So that's something I've done, and be happy to hear in the future what you guys have done, or just some ideas as you guys progress through your career. All right. This one I think is probably one of the most important in my opinion, but I think all of them are really important, so it's hard to pick. But basically, these come hand in hand. So building trust through clear communication. So in general, when I've interviewed or talked to people, all these tips are useful, but I feel like these two, trust and communication, are ones that I almost always try to bring up just to be like, I'm very aware of their importance. So striving to build trust is one of the most important aspects I can think of, and it comes from another equally important skill of developing clear communication. To practice clear communication, try to be honest and upfront about things. Keep people informed. A good example of a situation when this is critical is when you have multiple items to work on and somebody brings you a high priority task. And this is like one of the key interview questions that I tend to ask people. You can clearly and professionally tell the person who's asking you to do more work that you have other tasks, but if needed, and you can even tell them what the tasks are. If needed, you can push back those ones if this is a higher priority. So just generally communicate. Just be like, yeah, I got it. Just talk to them to make sure that they're aware. And again, in this scenario, if the person is giving you a task that is different from the person who gave you the previous task that you're working on, right? So then the next step is to inform the people who have told you to do the work that you are currently working on, to make sure it's okay if you delay the timelines. And this can be as simple as like doing an agenda or setting up small things, right? You still want to always communicate. Again, don't communicate and then sit there and wait. Communicate, keep working, figure out what you want to do, but just keep people informed. So most likely you would make this high priority task your new top priority, and if possible, when the person gives you the task, ask them as much information about the task, and then ideally when they need the task done by, and you can think about how long would it actually take you to do this task. And so that's just keeping everybody informed and making sure that you can shift your priorities, and being what they call dynamic, switching between items, is a good key business skill. Another communication advice is to try to keep it simple. If you need it, you can always give more detail when asked, but you can lose people if it's too long. So if you're writing emails to your boss, you're asking questions, try to just do the main thing. And sometimes you can do the main thing and then be like, here are some more additional details if you really feel like you need to communicate it. But in general, you can usually communicate it if asked, right? So it's like faster and just more efficient to just be like, here are the key details that you need to know. Let me know if you have more questions. And then on the clear communication, when people trust you, they feel like they can regularly depend on you. And it creates a much healthier relationship at work, and it can create an ability for your career to grow. So communication is a two-way street. It's not just that you're able to get your point across, but are you listening? On the next slide, I'll talk a little bit more about these aspects, but I'm also working on some key communication skills, and I bet you all of us can improve on being able to have better communication. So I want to kind of give you a little scenario. I do not 100% recall the exact question, but in my interview that I have for my current position, I was asked something along the lines of like, what are most important skills, or what do you do when you first start a job, something along that. But I do remember my response, and I do think that my response basically like got me the job. Which it was, I tend to go for jobs that are a stretch, and so I like that, and so I can learn and grow faster, and so it's usually kind of tricky to get the next thing, and so I do think that this answer really helped that. So I mentioned that when I start a new job, I look for opportunities to help people. So I try to volunteer if someone is stressed out or kind of seems like they need assistance with something. It gives me the opportunity to connect with that person, gives me the opportunity to provide, to prove that I am reliable, and it gives me opportunity to learn something new. And then most importantly, it helps the person trust me. And this is really important, is to like, as quickly as you can, develop this trust within your coworkers. And then if I need something in the future, they're much more likely to help me, and or people know that like I'm a team player, I'm here to help, and they're more likely to help me because they're like, oh well, maybe she'll help me in the future, or like I'm not just focused on my work and that's all I care about. I'm like looking at the bigger picture. And we'll actually talk a little bit about that more in the next slide. But I do think that even this is a good situation to do, where you try to volunteer for stuff. And then even if they decline it, it's still a positive. Even if you say, oh, can I help you with that? And they're like, oh, no, it's actually really complex. Like, it'll take me a lot longer to train you than if I just do it myself. They just know you're willing to help. So it's usually a really good thing to do. But this ties into our next topic of emotional intelligence. So one aspect of emotional intelligence is being aware of other people and their needs. And you'd be surprised how much people don't get this in the workforce. You think there's just like, like a knowledge intelligence of like, what do you know? And like, what skills can you do? Emotional intelligence is super critical. And in my leadership research, it's been a lot of, this is a key component that a lot of like CEOs and business people don't, like if people fail, it's usually due to their lack of emotional intelligence. So it's a good skill to start developing. So you just start thinking about what's happening with other people. So overall, I try to be really good about this, and I think it's really helped me in my career. And this is one thing that I'm going to talk about: communication. So one aspect that I think I can improve in my communication is through my emotional intelligence of like trying to watch other people and see how people react to me, see how people are doing. I've kind of noticed that sometimes I get excited and I talk over people, and that's like not a good thing. And even though it's usually because I feel like I have something to bring to the conversation and that I'm excited and I have like a solution to something, it's not, even though like my intentions are good, it's not justified. Like I shouldn't do it. And so I've been trying to, in the workforce particularly, watch and take a step back, and to only like kind of join the conversation when I think it's going to bring value, and when I think the people who are talking have fully expressed their idea. And it's hard. Sometimes I've noticed that people will keep going unless I join the conversation. They'll kind of like keep droning, and they're almost like, hello, help me, why are you not adding to this? But in general, I kind of just wait, especially people who are quieter, like let them finish. And then, or you can even be like, oh, I have an idea. Is it okay if I chime in? Or like you can actually like ask and check. It's a little awkward at first, but it's actually a pretty good habit to do. And so overall, you should think about other people and not just yourself. And this mindset really helps you be more successful at work. And then an aspect that ties in, that I feel like is part of emotional intelligence a lot is, but this deserves its own slide because this is so critical in the workforce. Do not take things personally. Like, it's not like people usually aren't out there to hurt you or, to sabotage you or whatnot. And even if they are, you're gonna have to deal with that in your own way. Just don't take things personally. Like, it's never beneficial. And even if it's positive, even if the people are like complimenting you on your work or whatnot, um, like, I would just say, like, don't let things go to your head and don't like let things like emotionally control you. And I think this is really critical. And I would say this is like the number one thing that I see drives people to HR issues, and people are back and forth at each other. So it's just an important aspect of emotional intelligence, and you need to be strong enough to think past the situation, right? So, like, if something happens and somebody offended you or somebody seems upset, like, don't like meet them with the same like energy. You don't know what's going on in their personal life. And so just like, even if people, I had a couple situations where people are like mean to me, I just assume something's going on in their life, and like, I am not the situation. Now, you do want to see, if you see a habit where somebody's like constantly annoyed at you or whatnot, you do want to think about, what can I do to improve the situation, right? You don't want to be like, it's their issue. Like, they're just messed up or whatever. Like, you want to see what you can do to fix it, but don't let it bog you down, if that makes sense. So always be nice at work, even if someone is mean to you. I've actually found, I was just talking to somebody about this the other day, that if somebody's kind of mean, like, the best way to like be like fight it is to actually like just be really nice. And like, sometimes that will frustrate them and make them stop being mean and just like go away, because maybe they're trying to rally you up. But in general, they're just probably having a bad day. And if you are really nice, it might be like, oh man, like, I shouldn't have like yelled at Hillary. Um, so just be nice. It's really simple, and a lot of people don't follow it, and it causes a lot of issues and bad blood, and people are all upset at each other. Um, and yeah, I've seen this a lot in the workforce, and it drags down everybody. Like, people don't want to work at the team. It's something that if I notice drama within a team, I do usually try to switch jobs. Like, or move somewhere else or do a different team, because I don't want to deal with it. And it's just not something I'm happy to do. And so, in general, it brings down everybody, but it particularly hurts the career of those making the issues. So just avoid drama, don't take things personally, and it'll all work out. But it's never worth it, and it's never beneficial to your career. Okay. There's another really important one. Ask for advice. This is something that I constantly do, and I think this is like a key to my success. It's almost like you don't want to sit around and be like, oh, what do I think I can improve? It is good. You want to think about what you can improve. But if you just straight up ask your boss, it's like the simplest thing. They tell you and then you do it and you improve. Like, it's like you can't really figure out what they want, because everyone's different. People, when I started my career and I started as an admin, people wanted you to take minutes differently, right? You go to a meeting and you take the notes for everybody, right? And then you email them out. Some people want everything captured. Some people want just like the very, very high level, just like a summary paragraph. Some people usually want something in between, or like all key decisions are captured, things like that. But the best way for me to learn, because when I got there, I would like, somebody taught me and I was doing it, and then I was applying it to multiple different groups that I was taking meeting minutes for, and people didn't like this or that or issues. And so I just straight up would be like, oh, like, this is my minutes. Like, do you have any advice on it? And I got a lot, and I just learned, okay, these people like it this way, these people like it that, and overall, I improved in my general, because I kind of just melded that as like my go-to. So just ask for advice. It's a great topic when a lot of times you have one-on-ones with your boss or leader of your group or whatever, and you would say like, I would love your advice. Is there anything I can do to improve? It's really, yeah, it's the fastest way to get insight on what they want from you. And then I've also heard about asking for advice instead of feedback. A lot of times they talk about advice is a little bit more personal. So it's almost like, hey, can you mentor me? And then people are a little bit flattered, and then it's just better. But its feedback is kind of the same thing. And then, as I've mentioned before, you should always be looking at your actions and the outcomes and thinking about what you can improve. And then, yeah, I suggest you do this periodically and often from multiple different people. Um, and then, so you don't have to wait till like your year-end review at work or whatever. You should just constantly be asking, or even asking your coworkers, like, "Hey, I've seen you've succeeded. Do you have any advice for me?" Like, people like it in general, and they will provide you usually good, honest advice or things that they've found that have helped them in their career. And then if something happens and you notice that somebody doesn't really like you, as we've talked about, my rule of thumb is not to spend any emotional energy. Um, so if somebody is a little harsh on the advice they give or whatnot, just take it and learn from it, and then try to show that you've changed. That's the best thing you can do, really. Um, and so I think this is really important. And if something goes wrong, you can always rethink, if I was to redo this, what would I do better next time? Okay, so in summary, these are the key tips that I think you should apply to your life, but also great for when you're starting a career. And then, and I've mentioned a few things that I'm trying to work on, and I would advise you to think about these and think about what can you work on, and make goals for yourself. It's a really important. And then we'll talk about technology and hard skills later. But you can also start thinking about those, and feel free to email me if you have specific things that you want to know how you can improve on. So thank you, everybody, and I hope you enjoyed this and apply this to your career.